Everyone thinks perfectionism is about high standards, but the truth is much darker. It's a survival strategy shaped by fear, comparison, and the belief that if you're not flawless, you're unworthy. This video will show you what perfectionism really does to your mind and why it quietly destroys your life from the inside out. We are raised to believe that perfection is the highest form of achievement, that the cleaner your life looks on the outside, the more together you are on the inside. From school grades to social expectations to the silent competition we create in our own heads, we are taught to measure our worth by how flawlessly we can perform. But perfection has a price so subtle you don't notice you're paying it until you're emotionally bankrupt. Because here's the truth, perfection doesn't make your life better. It makes your life smaller. It narrows your world to only the things you're certain you can do perfectly. And everything else, your dreams, your creativity, your curiosity, gets left behind. Part 1. The Perfectionist Trap. Perfectionism feels safe, predictable, controlled. It promises you a life without failure, without embarrassment, without mistakes. But there's a catch. To avoid mistakes, you must avoid life. You must avoid risks, opportunities, relationships, growth. Anything that requires you to be seen as imperfect. You stop trying new things because new things mean uncertainty. You stay in environments you have outgrown because leaving would mean facing the unknown. You shrink yourself so no one can point out your flaws. This is the perfection trap. You spend your life trying to avoid the pain of imperfection and end up creating a deeper pain called regret. Part 2. The psychology behind it. Perfectionism is not a personality trait, it's a coping mechanism. Psychologists describe it as a shield, a way to protect yourself from the emotional wounds you fear the most. Rejection, judgment, disapproval, not being good enough. Somewhere in your past, you learned that being flawless was the only way to be safe. Maybe you had parents who praised achievement more than effort. Maybe you were the good kid who learned that mistakes made people disappointed. Maybe you experienced failure in a moment that mattered, and your mind decided, never again, never let this happen again. Perfectionism isn't born from strength, it's born from fear. A fear so familiar it feels like discipline. Part 3. The Comparison Spiral. Perfectionism doesn't exist without comparison. You compare your beginning to someone else's middle, your messy reality to someone else's highlight reel, your insecurities to their confidence, and slowly you lose sight of what you actually want. You don't aim for the life that fits you. You aim for the life that looks impressive enough to silence the feeling of not being enough. Comparison doesn't push you upward, it pushes you inward, into self-doubt and a constant sense of inadequacy. You don't want to be the best, you just don't want to feel like the worst. Part 4. The Inner Critic. Inside every perfectionist lives a judge, a voice that never praises and only evaluates, a voice that remembers every mistake you've ever made. A voice that whispers, people will see you're not good enough. You should have tried harder. You should have known better. You could have done more. And no matter how much you achieve, the voice stays unsatisfied. This inner critic doesn't measure your life by progress, only by flaws. If you write 10 pages beautifully but struggle on one paragraph, the critic only sees the struggle. If you do 9 things right and 1 thing wrong, the critic only sees the wrong. You end every day feeling like you haven't done enough, because the critic moves the finish line every time you get close. Part 5. The Perfectionist's Exhaustion. Perfectionists aren't lazy. They're tired. Deeply tired. Because perfectionism means living in a constant state of emotional tension. You're always on guard, always aware, always trying to manage the impression you leave behind. This tension shows up as mental fatigue, low motivation, chronic procrastination, burnout, fear of starting, fear of finishing, feeling never enough, emotional numbness. This isn't lack of willpower, it's psychological exhaustion. You're not failing, you're overloaded. Part 6. Procrastination, the protective mechanism. Most people think perfectionists are productive. But the truth is the opposite. Perfectionism creates procrastination. Not because you don't care, but because you care too much. Your mind delays tasks not out of laziness, but to shield you from the fear of doing them imperfectly. Procrastination becomes emotional armor. It protects you from criticism, from judgment, from the possibility that your best effort won't be enough. You don't procrastinate because you're weak. You procrastinate because you're scared. And you've been scared for a long time. Part 7. The fear of being seen. Perfectionism is not the fear of doing something wrong. It's the fear of being seen while doing it. Mistakes feel unbearable because they make you visible. When you're visible, you can be judged, rejected, misunderstood. So perfectionists hide behind polished surfaces and invisible walls. You show the world the most controlled version of yourself. But the more you hide, the lonelier you become. Because you can't feel loved if you're only showing the version of you that is impossible to maintain. Part 8. The cost of being the reliable one. Perfectionists often become the responsible friend, the one people trust, the one who has it together, the one who gets things done. But underneath that identity is resentment, exhaustion, and pressure. You say yes when you want to say no. You help when you need help. You support others while you're falling apart. But perfectionists rarely break publicly. They break quietly, in silence, when no one is watching. Because admitting you're overwhelmed feels like failure. Part 9. The breaking point. Everyone reaches a moment when the weight of perfection becomes too heavy to carry. Sometimes it looks like burnout, sometimes like emotional numbness, sometimes like losing passion for the things you once loved. The breaking point is not weakness. It's your mind protecting itself. It's your body saying, I cannot keep living like this. And this moment, this collapse, is often the beginning of healing. Because perfectionism cannot survive when you finally see how much it costs you. Part 10. The shift. Healing from perfectionism doesn't require you to stop caring. It requires you to stop punishing yourself. It begins with choosing progress over performance, choosing honesty over image, choosing effort over outcome, choosing self-respect over self-criticism. It begins with simple truths like, I'm allowed to make mistakes. I don't need to earn my worth. My value isn't measured by my output. Done is better than perfect. My life isn't a performance. When these truths stop being ideas and start becoming beliefs, perfectionism loses its power. Freedom doesn't come when you finally become perfect. Freedom comes when you no longer need to be. It comes when you exhale, when you let go of impossible standards, when you stop trying to live a life that looks flawless and start living a life that feels honest. Your imperfections aren't flaws, they're fingerprints. proof that you're alive, growing, changing, becoming. One day, you will wake up and realize that the life you want doesn't require perfection. It requires presence, courage, and the willingness to be seen as you truly are. Not perfect. Welcome back to yourself. Welcome to Theater of Life.